The mission begins. The sky was dark as the Empire's fleet of warships hovered in orbit above the planet. Below them was a deadly Worlder-class 13 Deathworld, a place where no one had ever returned from. The Empire had heard the stories. Strange, monstrous creatures roamed the planet, and its environment was so hostile that even the toughest soldiers couldn't survive for long. But today, they were going to change that. The mission was clear: conquer the planet. And they were sending the best of the best. A team of elite soldiers had been assembled, trained, disciplined, and ready for anything. They were led by Captain Jace, a man known for his unshakable confidence and cold, calculating nature. He had been through countless battles, but this was different. This wasn't just another enemy to defeat. This was a world that had claimed the lives of every expedition that had dared to land. The soldiers gathered in the docking bay of the flagship, ready for the drop. They were silent, focused, their minds on the task ahead. Each one was wearing combat gear, their weapons holstered, and their expressions set in grim determination. They had been briefed on the mission, but none of them truly knew what they would face on that planet. Jace stood at the front, his eyes scanning the group. He could see the tension in their faces, the uncertainty that flickered in their eyes. They had trained for years, but nothing could prepare them for the unknown. "Stay sharp, stay together," Jace said, his voice calm but firm. "This is what we've trained for. We're going to do this, and we're going to do it right. No one gets left behind." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The soldiers nodded, their nerves tightening, but their resolve hardening. The doors to the ship opened, and the sounds of the battle below could already be heard. It was time to go. They boarded the transport shuttles, their faces set, their hearts racing. The Empire's warships released their hold on the planet and began their descent, cutting through the atmosphere with ease. The soldiers watched through the shuttle's window as the world below grew larger and more terrifying. The planet was a swirling storm of black clouds and violent winds. Massive lightning bolts struck the surface, and the ground seemed to pulse with an energy all its own. As they neared the landing site, Jace felt the weight of the mission. His mind raced, analyzing every possible scenario. The Empire had warned them about the planet's dangers. No one had ever survived long enough to send back a report. It was one of the most dangerous places in the galaxy, but the Empire didn't back down. They had a job to do, and they were going to do it no matter the cost. The transport shuttle hit the ground with a heavy thud, sending a jolt through their bodies. The soldiers quickly unstrapped themselves and rushed out, weapons ready, scanning their surroundings. They were on a rocky, desolate landscape. The air was thick with dust, and the sky above was dark, lit only by flashes of lightning that split the air. "Stay close," Jace ordered, his voice steady. "Keep your eyes open and stay alert. This is a hostile world, and we need to get in and get out quickly." The soldiers moved forward, their boots crunching against the dry, cracked earth. As they walked, they could feel the heat radiating off the ground, the air thick and stifling. The planet's surface was a barren wasteland, devoid of life, but that was exactly what made it so dangerous. A world that looked lifeless on the outside could hold untold horrors beneath its surface. The team advanced cautiously, their eyes darting from one side to the other. The planet felt alive, as if it was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every noise, every shadow, seemed amplified in the silence. The soldiers tried to shake off the unease creeping into their minds. They were the Empire's finest. They were trained for this. As they walked deeper into the terrain, the wind began to pick up. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Jace could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and the air was filled with a deafening roar. Jace barely had time to react. As a massive creature burst from the ground, its body covered in thick, scaly armor, its eyes glowing with rage. The soldiers scrambled into action, weapons drawn, but the creature was too fast. It lunged, its jaws snapping shut just inches from Jace's face. Fire! Jace shouted. The soldiers opened fire, their blasters flashing as they aimed at the creature's armored hide. The blasts hit with a loud crack, but the creature didn't falter. It roared again, shaking the ground beneath them. The soldiers backed away, but the creature was relentless. It circled them, its eyes fixed on its prey. "Fall back," Jace ordered. "We need to regroup." The team quickly moved back, firing at the creature as they went, but it didn't seem to care. The thing was fast, and it wasn't stopping until it had claimed its kill. The soldiers were forced to retreat further, running across the rocky terrain as the creature followed closely behind. Jace could hear the panic in his soldiers' voices. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were the Empire's best, and yet they were being pushed back by a single creature. The Empire's forces had never lost to something like this before. What had they walked into? As the creature howled behind them, Jace's mind raced. He had to get his team to safety. They had to find a way to survive, or they would be just another failed mission. A warning to the next group of soldiers foolish enough to step foot on this planet. The mission was just beginning, but it had already become clear this was going to be unlike any battle they had ever faced. The landing and first impressions, the shuttle doors slammed shut behind the team, sealing them inside the transport as it descended toward the planet's surface. The soldiers were silent, their hands gripping their weapons tightly as the rumble of the shuttle's engines vibrated through the floor beneath them. Outside, the planet loomed, its surface a dark mass of jagged mountains and deep, shadowy valleys. Through the shuttle windows, the planet's harsh atmosphere was visible, thick with swirling storms and violent, flashing lightning. This was no ordinary world. This was a Deathworld, a place where even the environment itself seemed hostile. The shuttle rocked violently as it entered the planet's turbulent atmosphere, and the crew braced for impact. "We're almost there," Captain Jace's voice echoed through the comms, breaking the tense silence. "Stay sharp. This world will test us like nothing we've faced before. Watch each other's backs." His words did little to ease the tension in the air. The soldiers had been through countless missions before, but nothing had prepared them for this. No one had ever returned from this planet, and with every passing second, they could feel the weight of that fact sinking in. The shuttle hit the ground with a jolt, sending everyone stumbling forward. It wasn't a smooth landing, but it was enough to get them on the surface. The doors hissed open, and the soldiers quickly filed out, weapons at the ready. The air on this planet was thick, humid, and filled with the unmistakable scent of sulfur. The soldiers immediately felt the heat on their skin, the kind of heat that seemed to crawl beneath their armor. The ground was uneven, cracked in places, and dust swirled around them like the breath of some ancient, unseen creature. Captain Jace stepped forward, scanning the horizon. The planet's sky was an eerie, dark gray, and in the distance, jagged mountains rose like the teeth of some massive predator. There was no sign of life, no plants, no animals. The only movement came from the wind, which howled across the barren terrain. "This is where it all ends," whispered Corporal Rena, her voice filled with dread. She was one of the youngest soldiers, but she had seen enough battles to know that this world was not like any other they'd encountered. "We're not here to wonder," Jace replied firmly, locking eyes with her. "We're here to conquer. Keep moving." The team advanced, their boots crunching against the rocky, dry soil. The sense of isolation was overwhelming, and every sound seemed amplified. The only thing they could hear was the wind howling and the distant echoes of their own footsteps. There were no birds, no rustling of leaves, nothing that would suggest that this planet had ever been home to anything. Jace's instincts were telling him something was wrong. It was too quiet, too still. The air was heavy with tension, and though nothing had attacked yet, he could feel something lurking just beyond their sight. They moved deeper into the planet's surface, with every soldier keeping their eyes wide open for any signs of movement. The landscape seemed unnatural-like. The world itself was trying to keep them out. The soldiers pressed on, unaware that they were already being watched. Suddenly, Sergeant Tarek, a burly veteran with years of battle experience, froze. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. "Captain, I don't like this," Tarek muttered, his hand hovering near his weapon. "It's too quiet. There's something out there." Jace turned to him. "Stay sharp, Sergeant. It's just the planet messing with us. We've been through worse." But even as Jace said the words, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by something unseen. The soldiers continued to march forward, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. They were deep in enemy territory now. The sooner they secured their landing site and set up their base, the better. But just as the thought crossed Jace's mind, a loud screech pierced the horrible, bone-chilling sound that made every soldier stop dead in their tracks. It came from somewhere nearby, deep in the shadows of the jagged mountains. "What the hell was that?" Rena whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath them began to tremble. It was subtle at first, then grew more intense, until the very earth beneath their feet seemed to shake with a life of its own. The team tightened their grip on their weapons as the trembling grew stronger. The planet seemed alive, as if the ground itself was preparing to swallow them whole. And then, without warning, the ground erupted. A massive creature, so large it was almost impossible to comprehend, burst from the earth like an ancient titan awakening from a long slumber. Its body was covered in thick, armored plates, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural, hungry light. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The soldiers didn't have time to react. The creature charged, its claws swiping through the air with terrifying speed. One of the soldiers was caught off guard, and before they could even lift their weapon, the creature's claws tore through their armor like paper. "Open fire!" Jace shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos as the team scattered. Blasters fired in every direction, but the creature didn't even flinch. It roared in fury, its massive jaws snapping shut just inches from Rena. The team fought back with everything they had, but the creature was relentless. It seemed to be everywhere at once, its massive body moving faster than they thought possible. The soldiers struggled to stay on their feet, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. "We can't beat this thing," Tarek shouted, his voice filled with panic. "We need to fall back." Jace's mind raced. They couldn't afford to lose any more men. "Retreat, get to the shuttle," he ordered, his voice sharp. But as the team began to fall back, they realized that the shuttle was too far and the creature was too fast. With no choice left, they fought to hold their ground, desperately trying to survive. The first lost the air was thick with smoke as the soldiers retreated under heavy fire. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the massive creature's roars echoed through the canyon-like landscape. The team moved in quick, frantic bursts, zigzagging to avoid the creature's attacks. It had already claimed one of their own, and the thought of losing anyone else weighed heavily on them. Jace led the charge, his mind racing. They couldn't keep running forever. They needed to regroup, or they would be picked off one by one. But the creature wasn't giving them a chance. It moved swiftly, its powerful legs kicking up clouds of dust as it pursued them relentlessly. "Keep moving," Jace barked, pushing his team forward. "We need to make it to the ship. Don't stop." But as the team scrambled to escape, they could hear the screams of their fallen comrade, still echoing in their ears. It had been Corporal Ferris, a brave soldier with a family back home, who had been caught in the creature's savage grip. The sound of his voice, begging for help, haunted Jace's thoughts. He hadn't been fast enough to save him. Jace gritted his teeth, trying to push the guilt aside. The mission wasn't over. They still had to survive. "Focus," he ordered, snapping back to the present. "We get through this, or we all die." The soldiers, panting and exhausted, continued to sprint through the desolate terrain. Their armor was scratched and dented from their encounter with the creature, and their weapons were running low on energy. Jace's heart raced as he led them toward the shuttle, praying they would make it in time. But just as hope seemed within reach, the ground beneath them shook again, and a massive roar split the air. The creature had found them once more. "Scatter!" Jace shouted, but it was too late. The creature was upon them. It lunged, its claws flashing through the air, and Sergeant Tarek was the next to fall. He didn't even have a chance to raise his weapon before the creature's monstrous claws grabbed him, tearing him from the ground. Tarek's scream echoed through the air as the beast's jaws closed in on him. Jace's heart stopped. Tarek had been his right-hand man, his most trusted soldier. Losing him felt like a blow to the chest. But there was no time to mourn. The creature was still coming, and they needed to get out fast. "Fall back now." Jace roared, his voice laced with urgency. But as the team scrambled to get away, it became clear that they were outmatched. The creature was faster, stronger, and its attacks were relentless. The soldiers fired everything they had, but the blaster bolts barely scratched the surface of its thick hide. Jace turned to see Rena, the youngest of the group, struggling to keep her footing. She was exhausted, her eyes wide with fear, and her blaster was almost out of power. The creature had stopped chasing them temporarily, but Jace knew it wouldn't be long before it came back for another attack. "We need to split up," Jace shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. "It's our only chance. Run for the shuttle. Don't look back." With a heavy heart, Jace made a decision. He had to sacrifice part of the team to ensure the others would make it to safety. As he scanned the group, he noticed Rena was too slow, too weak to outrun the creature. He couldn't let her become the next victim. "Rena, go," he yelled, pushing her toward the shuttle. "I'll cover you. Get to the ship." Tears filled Rena's eyes as she looked at him, but she didn't hesitate. She ran, sprinting toward the shuttle, her legs burning with the effort. Jace turned back to face the team, ready to fight until the very end. But the creature wasn't finished yet. It charged again, its eyes locked on the remaining soldiers, and before Jace could react, it was upon them. There was no time for strategy now. It was every soldier for themselves. Jace drew his blaster and fired into the creature's face, hoping to land a blow that might slow it down, but it barely flinched. The creature roared, shaking the ground beneath them, and with one mighty swipe of its claws, it sent another soldier flying through the air. The remaining team members scattered, trying to avoid its deadly reach. Jace's heart pounded in his chest as he backed toward the shuttle. The creature was closing in. They were running out of time. He knew that not everyone would make it. As the final soldier, Sergeant Marcus, made a break for the shuttle, Jace made his choice. He couldn't let the creature catch him. His men had already sacrificed too much. "Go, Marcus," Jace shouted, pushing him forward. "Get to the ship. Go." Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran, leaving Jace behind to face the creature. The beast roared in fury, its massive body charging straight at Jace. With one final look at the shuttle, Jace stood his ground, determined not to be taken down without a fight. The creature lunged, its jaws wide open, and just before it reached him, Jace fired a final, desperate shot. Surviving the night, the sun had long since disappeared, leaving the planet in a thick, oppressive darkness. The air was heavy, the wind howling across the barren, rocky terrain. Captain Jace stood by the shuttle, his mind racing. The creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, hunting them. He had barely made it inside the shuttle in time, and the team was now safe for the moment. But the creature was relentless, and Jace knew it wouldn't stop until they were all dead. The soldiers who had made it to the shuttle, now huddled together in the small, cramped space, exchanged uneasy glances. They were down to just a handful, Jace. Rena, Marcus, and a few others. The rest of their team was gone, victims of a planet that seemed to have a will of its own. Jace looked around at the tired, frightened faces. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice rough from exhaustion. "That thing will find us if we stay in one place. We need to move." Rena, her face pale from the loss of their comrades, spoke up. "Where do we go, Captain? This place... It's a nightmare. There's nowhere safe." Jace paused for a moment, considering her words. He didn't have an answer. He didn't know where they could go. The shuttle was their only means of escape, but it was damaged, and the creature had proven that it could reach them anywhere. Even if they managed to take off, the planet's atmosphere was unforgiving, and the creature might find them before they could make it back into orbit. "We need to keep moving," Jace repeated, determination creeping into his voice. "We're not going to die here, not after everything we've been through." The shuttle's lights flickered weakly, and the tension in the air was almost unbearable. They had survived the first wave, but everyone knew that survival on this planet wasn't about winning a single battle. It was about endurance. The planet was a living, breathing death trap, and it would wear them down piece by piece until they were all gone. As the team prepared to leave, Jace could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had no plan, no real way of knowing what was out there. The Deathworld had already taken so much, and now it was waiting for them to slip up, to make one wrong move. The creature wasn't the only danger. The entire planet was a threat. Jace turned to Marcus, who had been the quiet one throughout the ordeal. "How's the shuttle?" he asked, his voice low. Marcus glanced at the damaged systems and then back at Jace. "It's patched up, but it's not perfect. We can use it to get around for now, but if we try to leave the atmosphere, we might not make it." "We'll deal with that when the time comes," Jace said, though doubt gnawed at him. "For now, we need to move. Get to the next ridge." Rena, who had been silent, spoke up again. We're losing people. This thing is killing us one by one. What if we never make it off this planet? What if we're just ... meant to die here? Her words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Jace clenched his fists, trying to push the thought away, but Rena's fear was shared by everyone. They were stranded on a world that no one had ever returned from. They had no backup, no reinforcements. They were on their own. We're not dying here, Rena, Jace said firmly. We've survived this long, and we'll keep fighting. As long as we're still breathing, we're still in this. Now, let's move. The team filed out of the shuttle, one by one, weapons drawn. They had to keep moving. The night on this Deathworld wasn't like any night they had known. It was a kind of silence that screamed danger. The wind howled, and the landscape seemed to shift as if the very ground wanted to swallow them up. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of something primal and dangerous. Rena clutched her weapon tightly, her eyes scanning the shadows. Every movement felt like a threat. The trees around them, twisted and gnarled, seemed to stretch toward them, reaching out like fingers. They were surrounded by a sense of something ancient and malevolent. The creature was still out there, but it wasn't the only danger. The planet itself seemed alive with the intent to kill. As they climbed toward the ridge, Jace felt a chill run down his spine. There was something about this place, something unnatural. The planet was trying to crush their spirits, break them down until there was nothing left. The soldiers were on the edge, their minds frayed by exhaustion and the fear of the unknown. But Jace wouldn't let them give in. Not yet, not while there was still hope. Suddenly, a sharp screech echoed through the air, sending the team into a frenzy. They froze, their weapons raised, looking around in all directions. "Stay quiet," Jace whispered. "Don't make a sound." The screech came again, closer this time. The creature was out there, somewhere in the darkness, but they couldn't see it. Not yet. Jace held his breath, his eyes darting around the eerie, moonlit landscape. The wind howled louder, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Something was coming. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel its presence. The air had changed, thickened with anticipation. And then, without warning, the ground erupted once more from beneath them, massive. Writhing roots shot up like serpents from the earth, snapping and coiling. The team barely had time to react as one of the roots lashed out, wrapping around Sergeant Marcus's leg. He screamed in pain, struggling to free himself, but the root tightened, pulling him down into the earth. "Marcus," Rena screamed, rushing to help him, but it was too late. The root dragged him into the ground, disappearing with a horrific, bone-crushing snap. Jace's heart sank as he watched the horror unfold. The creature was not alone on this world. The very planet itself had turned against them. The escape plan, the horror of Marcus's disappearance, haunted them as they moved deeper into the rugged landscape. The roots, or whatever they were, had dragged him into the very earth itself, vanishing without a trace. There was no sign of struggle, no clue as to where he had gone. One moment he had been with them, and the next, he was gone, swallowed whole by the planet. Captain Jace's heart pounded in his chest, but there was no time to mourn. The creature was still out there, and the planet had shown its true nature. The ground trembled beneath their feet, as though the earth itself was alive, waiting to take more of them. "We can't stay here," Jace said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to get to the shuttle. It's our only chance." The others nodded in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Every step felt like it could be their last, and they moved as quickly as their tired legs would allow, but every movement felt slow to slow. The planet wasn't giving them any breaks. It seemed to pulse with some kind of malevolent energy, as if it were aware of their every move, anticipating their next mistake. "We're losing time," Rena said, her voice tight with fear. "It's getting worse. The planet knows we're here. It's not just the creatures. The whole damn place is against us." Jace glanced at her, seeing the fear in her eyes. He knew that she was right. This planet wasn't just hostile, it was actively trying to kill them. But they couldn't afford to dwell on that. They had to keep moving. "We have to make it to the shuttle," Jace said firmly. "That's the only way we get out of here." But deep down, Jace wasn't sure if they would make it. The creature, the Earth, and whatever other dangers lurked in the shadows were all out to ensure their failure. Every step felt like a battle just to stay alive. They pressed on, their weapons ready, scanning the environment with every step. The wind howled, carrying strange, unsettling sounds from all directions. It was impossible to tell if they were footsteps, animal cries, or something worse. The world around them was a constant reminder of their vulnerability, each rustle and crack in the distance sending their hearts into overdrive. And then, without warning, the ground cracked beneath them. Rena screamed as she stumbled forward, her foot falling through a large fissure that opened up beneath her. She barely caught herself in time, her hands clawing at the dirt as the earth seemed to shift underneath her, trying to swallow her whole. Jace was by her side in an instant, pulling her back from the edge of the abyss. "What the hell was that?" Tarek shouted, stepping back from the fissure with wide eyes. "It's like the whole planet is shifting." "We have to keep moving," Jace snapped. There was no time to waste. The shuttle's not far. If we stay here any longer, we'll be trapped. But as they began to move again, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Every noise made their hearts race. Every crack in the ground felt like the planet was about to claim them. Jace's mind was spinning with possibilities. What if they couldn't reach the shuttle? What if the planet was alive in ways they couldn't even understand? "I'm not sure how much longer we can keep going," Rena said, her breath shaky. "We're running out of time, Captain." Jace stopped in his tracks, looking around at the barren wasteland that surrounded them. The shuttle was their last hope, but they had no way of knowing if they could make it in time. The creature was still out there, and it wasn't just luck, it was hunting them. The planet itself was working against them. "We need a plan," Jace said, his voice low and determined. "We're not getting out of here the same way we came in. If we try to take the shuttle and leave the atmosphere, we'll be sitting ducks." "Then what do we do?" Marcus asked, his voice strained. "We can't just sit here and wait to die." Jace stared out into the distance. His mind raced, but there was only one thing that made sense. They had to leave the surface, but they couldn't just fly straight out. The creature and the planet would track them down. They needed to outsmart it, to get to the shuttle without being followed. "There's a cave system to the north," Jace said, finally forming a plan. "We'll use the caves to get closer to the shuttle without being seen. Once we're there, we can make a run for it. The creature won't be able to follow us into the caves." "But we don't know what's in those caves," Tarek said, his voice trembling. "What if there's something worse in there?" "There's no time for fear," Jace said, his eyes narrowing. "We either die here, or we fight for a chance. To survive, we move now, or we don't move at all." Without another word, they began their trek toward the caves. The ground beneath them seemed to shift again, but they pressed on, determined not to let the planet claim any more of them. They were fighting for their lives, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The caves loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, as if the planet itself was beckoning them to enter. Jace led the way, his hand on his blaster, his mind focused on the goal. They had a chance, but it was slipping away with every step they took. As they entered the cave, a new kind of darkness settled over them. It wasn't the darkness of the night, it was the darkness of the unknown. The cave stretched deep into the earth, and with every step, the soldiers could feel the weight of their situation. The planet had not given up, and the creature had not stopped hunting them. But for the first time in hours, they had a plan. And for the first time since landing, they felt like they had a chance. Final showdown. The cave system was unlike anything they had expected. The walls were jagged, covered in strange, glowing moss that barely lit their way. Each step they took echoed in the eerie silence, the air thick with a staleness that seemed to smother them. The sound of their boots on the uneven ground was the only thing that kept them grounded in the reality of their situation. The further they went into the cave, the colder it became. The darkness pressed in around them, wrapping itself around their minds, amplifying their fear. The planet was alive, and the deeper they ventured, the more it felt like the planet itself was trying to consume them, pulling them into its core. "We can't keep going much longer," Rena whispered, her voice trembling. "I can feel it, this place, ... it's alive. It's watching us." Jace didn't respond. He was focused, his thoughts racing. The plan was to get to the shuttle, but every instinct told him that they were being led into a trap. The cave system seemed endless, twisting deeper into the planet's core. It felt like they were walking through the belly of the beast itself, and they were not alone. The screeching sound came again. It was closer this time, the ground beneath. Their feet began to rumble. "They found us," Marcus said, his voice full of dread. JAC single quotes as the sound grew louder, reverberating through the walls of the cave. The creature, the same one that had torn through their ranks, was following them. They had thought they had escaped, but it had tracked them down, and now it was in the cave with them. "We need to move faster," Jace barked, his voice sharp, with urgency. "Get to the shuttle, now." The soldiers broke into a sprint, their weapons raised, but the cave seemed to stretch endlessly before them. No matter how fast they moved, the feeling of being hunted never left. Each step felt like it was being watched. The darkness seemed to close in around them, and the screech grew louder with each passing moment. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath their feet. Rena cried out as she tumbled into a hidden pit, her body hitting the jagged rocks below with a sickening thud. Jace reached down to pull her back up, but something was wrong. The pit seemed to be alive, the earth itself shifting beneath them as if the planet was swallowing them whole. Jace's mind raced. There was no time to lose. The creature was closing in, and now Rena was trapped. He pulled her up, his arms straining against the weight of the situation. The earth trembled again, and a loud crash echoed from behind them. The creature had arrived. "Get up, move," Jace shouted, his heart pounding in his chest. They didn't have time to hesitate. The creature was closing in, its massive body thundering through the cave, shaking the walls with each step. Jace could hear its breath, a low growl that rattled his bones. It was right behind them now. Rena scrambled to her feet, her face pale but determined. "We can't outrun it, Captain." Jace didn't respond. He didn't have time to argue. They had one chance left. The shuttle was just ahead, but the creature was already barreling toward them, its claws scraping against the walls of the cave, sending a wave of debris crashing down. It was faster than they had anticipated, and the escape route they had been counting on was now a race for survival. "Cover the entrance," Jace shouted to the soldiers who were still with him. "We need to hold it off long enough to get to the shuttle." The team turned, weapons raised, and fired into the oncoming beast. Their blasters lit up the cave, sending bright flashes into the darkness. But the creature didn't falter. It kept coming, its enormous form moving with terrifying speed. "We can't stop it like this," Marcus shouted, his voice desperate. "We need to run." But Jace stood his ground, his hand raised, signaling them to hold their fire for a moment. "No, we fight back now, or we don't leave at all." For a moment, the soldiers hesitated. The creature's eyes glowed in the dark, and its powerful form filled the cave. But Jace didn't back down. The Empire had sent them here, and they weren't going to fail without a fight. He aimed his blaster at the creature's face, firing shot after shot, but it barely seemed to notice. The creature's armor-like skin absorbed the blasts, leaving it unharmed. The team was running out of options, and fast. Suddenly, Rena screamed, "Look out!" Jace turned just in time to see the creature charging directly at them, its jaws wide open, ready to finish what it had started. The ground shook with each step it took, and Jace knew they couldn't dodge it forever. "Retreat," Jace shouted, pulling Rena with him as he sprinted toward the shuttle. Now, the creature was right on their heels. The walls of the cave cracked as the beast's claws dug into the rock, pulling itself forward. It was faster, angrier, and more relentless than ever. The shuttle was almost within reach, but there was no guarantee they'd make it. With a final push, Jace dove into the shuttle, pulling Rena inside just as the creature's claws slammed into the ground beside them. The shuttle door slammed shut with a deafening clang, and the soldiers collapsed against the walls, gasping for breath. "Get us out of here," Jace ordered, his voice hoarse with fear and exhaustion. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and they shot upward, tearing through the atmosphere. The creature's screeches faded as they broke free of the planet's deadly grasp. The team was still alive, but barely, as they ascended into the dark sky. Jace glanced down at the planet below, knowing they had escaped the worst of it. But even as the creature's roars faded into the distance, a thought gnawed at him. What if this planet wasn't done with them? One soldier returns. The stars outside the shuttle window seemed distant, almost unreal, as Jace sat in the cockpit, staring into the endless expanse of space. His heart still raced, the adrenaline from the battle still coursing through his veins. They had escaped. The creature, the planet, everything they had fought so hard to survive was now behind them. Or so he thought. As the shuttle broke free from the planet's atmosphere, a sense of relief washed over the remaining soldiers. They were battered and bruised, but they were alive. For the first time since they had landed, they allowed themselves to breathe, but Jace couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. The planet, this world of death, had taken so much from them. What if the escape wasn't the end? What if there was more to this planet than they had realized? What if, in some twisted way, the planet had one? "We made it," Rena said quietly, her voice hoarse from the struggle. She was sitting beside Jace, her eyes still wide with disbelief. She had lost more than any of them, and yet she was the first to find a flicker of hope. Jace didn't reply. Instead, he focused on the controls, guiding the shuttle further into space. The planet was receding in the distance, but the image of that massive creature, of the soldiers who hadn't made it, haunted him. "We lost Tarek," Marcus said, his voice flat. And Ferris, ... and the others. You think we'll ever make it home? The weight of the question lingered in the air. They were survivors, but at what cost? The Deathworld had claimed their comrades, their mission, their very lives. They had lost everything. I don't know, Jace said finally, his voice rough. But we're still here, and that means something. There was a long silence before Marcus spoke again. What do we tell the Empire when we get back? How do we explain that we failed? The question stung. Jace had no answer. The Empire had sent them to conquer the Deathworld, to prove that humanity could withstand any challenge. But in the end, they had been the ones tested and they had failed in ways that no one could understand. We'll tell them the truth, Jace said after a moment, his voice steady but heavy with the truth of what they had endured. We'll tell them that the planet wasn't something we could just conquer. We'll tell them that we fought ... and that we lost, but we survived. Another long silence passed as the shuttle continued its journey, leaving the dead planet behind. Jace could feel the weight of the mission pressing on him. The ship's interior was quiet, too quiet, as the soldiers absorbed what had happened. But then a sudden alarm blared through the shuttle's interior, snapping everyone out of their thoughts. What is it? Rena asked, her voice sharp. Jace's eyes widened as he looked at the control panel. It's a signal, a distress signal, a distress signal. Marcus echoed. From where? Jace's fingers flew over the controls, tracking the source of the signal. It was weak, almost impossible to detect, but it was unmistakable. He stared at the screen in disbelief. It's from the planet, Jace said, his voice barely a whisper. Rena. And Marcus exchanged looks, confusion and dread in their eyes. But how? Rena asked, her voice faltering. We left it behind. There was nothing left on that planet. Jace didn't answer. He was already pulling up the data, searching for answers. The signal was faint, broken almost, like someone or something was calling from the depths of the planet, trying to make contact. Jace's heart began to race as the truth slowly began to sink in. The planet hadn't just been hostile, it had been alive. It had drawn them in, consumed them, and now it was reaching out again, sending them a message. The screen flickered, and a faint voice crackled through the shuttle's speakers. Help, ... It was barely audible, but Jace knew that voice. It was Ferris, the soldier they had lost, the one who had been taken by the creature, the one who had screamed for help as he was dragged into the depths of the planet. Ferris was still alive. Jace's mind reeled. How could this be? He had seen Ferris get torn apart, heard his cries as the creature dragged him into the earth. There was no way he could have survived, but there was no denying it. The voice was real. The signal was coming from the planet, from the place they had just left. We need to go back, Jace said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you crazy? Marcus demanded. We've lost so much already. Ferris is gone. I heard him, Jace said, his eyes wild with disbelief. He's still down there. He's alive. The shuttle was quiet as the soldiers stared at Jace, processing the impossible. Reality, but there was no time to waste. They were too far from the planet now to turn back easily. And yet, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that they had unfinished business. Something more had happened on that world, and Ferris was somehow still a part of it. We can't just leave him, Jace said, his voice firm. But Marcus shook his head. We've already lost too much. What if it's a trap? What if the planet is calling us back, pulling us in so it can finish what it started? Jace didn't respond. He couldn't. The planet had taken their comrades. It had taken everything. And now it was offering them a chance to save one of their own. The choice was clear. I'm going back, Jace said. We're not leaving anyone behind. The shuttle's course began to shift as Jace turned the ship around, heading back toward the Deathworld. The soldiers exchanged looks, fear and uncertainty in their eyes. But Jace was resolute. Ferris was still out there, and no matter the cost, he would bring him home. The planet might have taken their team, their mission, their pride, but Jace was determined that it would not take another life, not on his watch.